Welcome to the Mango Effect podcast, where every week we talk about the path to living a limitless life and having the freedom to do it your way. No topics are off limits. We get into the practical, the hypothetical, and the downright juicy stuff. I'm Mindy Rosser, your host and lifestyle cheerleader, and I'm here today to talk about why surfers are not flaky and how we can actually all begin to find our rhythm with nature. So if you have ever wondered if the stereotype of the flaky surfer is actually true, I'm going to spill the beans today. I'm going to tell you the ins and outs of being a surfer and what is flaky and what is not. So your perspective actually changes on this topic the moment you get the stoke, as we call it, as all of a sudden you're expected to plan your days in rhythm with nature in ways that you have never experienced before. And before I moved here to Hawaii, it was very different, and I had a very predictable day. I could tell you when I was working out. I would actually time my workouts around nutrition and when I would have the most strength. Like, I was a complete fitness nut. Like, you think total hardcore gym rat, that was me. Sometimes I was there twice a day, especially when I lived in Indiana. I will tell you, in Indiana during the wintertime, there is not much to do. So I was at the gym in the morning before the sun was up, getting my sauna on, doing my CrossFit WOD workout. Then I'd come back in the evening. Of course, there's free childcare, so bring your kids. I had little ones at the time, so I really liked the childcare, and I would use the maximum allotment of time to get in my afternoon workout. But it was really, really predictable. And so, especially in the winter, I kind of had this rhythm where I would work out a lot because there was nothing else to do. And I also had this conception, or I guess you should say it's a misconception about surfers. Like, when I thought of a surfer, if you would have asked me way back then, what do you think of surfers? I'm like, they're flaky, like they never show up where they're supposed to show up. They're kind of like skater dudes, they're kind of like the low life of society. Like, this is what I had in my head before I really got into the sport. So it was so different actually moving here and understanding that all of life in Hawaii, at least how I've experienced it, I can't speak for everyone, but all of the people that I know, all of the people that we kind of hang out with here on the island, kids' friends, it really does all revolve around the ocean. And there is no reason to live in Hawaii if you don't like the ocean, because everything here it's central to the culture. It is central to how people run their days. It dictates everything, like from the time that you wake up, to what you're doing during the day, to what breaks you're going to where you're going to party with your friends. All of this is dictated by the ocean and by nature, by the storms, by the wind, by the weather patterns. And I never actually paid much attention to the Doppler, I guess is what we called it on the mainland. And now I'm like such a nerd. It's like I got to know the wind, I got to know the swell direction, I got to know the period, which is how many seconds, so that'll tell you how big the waves are actually going to be. Have to look at the storm and like watch the storm kind of come across the ocean. All of this stuff I never paid attention to before, because it is critical to being a surfer. You can't just expect that any time of day you can go out and catch waves. And that was my assumption. When I first started surfing, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess surfers they go out and there's always waves and you just kind of go catch waves, and that's how it works. But it is not how it works. If you want to become a good surfer, or even just a decent surfer, what you need to learn is reading the wind, weather, storm, surf report, and you got to read it like multiple times per day because it always changes. And then the beautiful thing for those of you who really want to nerd out and want to see what it's like, check out Surfline. It does have cameras. So if you want to see some of my favorite spots, check out surfline.com. I will tell you, look at the Haleiwa cam. I watched that cam. Puena Point is pretty good, but Laniakea is a really good one to watch. Like, if you want to see massive waves, sometimes, like right now, it's probably pretty massive. If you're actually listening to this when I'm talking about it, it is pretty big this weekend. So you probably will see some massive waves on the camera if you go give it a look. But basically, what I'm trying to say is you actually have to be in rhythm with nature. And if you try to fight nature, you can't surf because you're going against the rhythm of Mother Nature and the ocean dictates everything. And it actually requires a lot of intuition. I have learned that it is not just about knowing the actual surfing skills, it's actually being able to, first of all, you do have to learn the fundamentals of surfing. You have to learn how to paddle. You have to know how to stand up. You have to know what the wave looks like, when it's going to break, where it's going to break, how it's going to break, where you need to be on your board. There are all of these things that are important. But below that, like once you understand some of the basics, it's really about when you are in the water, you are sitting there, you are feeling the energy. And I know it feels like woo-woo and stuff, but every surfer, if you've done any water sports, you probably understand what I'm saying too. If you've ever, done any kayaking, canoeing, any of these water activities, you know what I'm talking about. Like you have to be in tune with what's going on around you and your surroundings. Otherwise, you can easily get yourself into trouble. I went on a whitewater rafting trip and we pretty much got ourselves into trouble and got into some dangerous situations. So it doesn't matter what type of water you are in, but you do have to be aware of your surroundings, and we're applying it to surfing here. So when I'm sitting out there, it is very meditative for me, and it's also this feeling where I try to envision like the ocean is its own entity, and it's going to dictate what is going to happen for me as a surfer. And I have to also be really thoughtful about where I paddle out, how I paddle out, how the current is moving, how the water looks, even the energy, because you can sometimes even sense, like if people say, well, what about sharks? Well, you can kind of sense it too. Sometimes you can feel like there's something a little bit eerie in the water, in which case you should look around and check your surroundings just to be sure. Have I ever encountered a shark yet out in the water? No, thankfully. But I have had some eerie sensations where I knew I should probably paddle in. So there are different things when it comes to the ocean that you just really have to be in rhythm with. And we also talk a lot about this with surfing and catching the waves. Like sometimes you'll go out, you'll have the most amazing session. You get into a rhythm where it's a circle. So like you catch the wave and then you kind of circle back to the spot. You ride the rip current and go right back to the takeoff zone. Catch another wave, ride the current, go back to the takeoff zone. So you get into this rhythm, and you can tell when somebody is surfing in rhythm or is not in rhythm. And even really great surfers can sometimes struggle to get into rhythm. If you want to see this in action too, just check out the WSL. It's a World Surf League. Again, I'm like a crazy surf fan. If you have not guessed this already, I watch every surf heat from start to finish, every single series, every single contest, and I'm the one in the household that is telling everyone, don't tell me who won. I have to watch it from start to finish. But if you watch any, like even just a little snippet, like of a condensed heat, just type in YouTube, WSL, type in Kelly Slater or John Florence or one of them. You'll get to watch a surf heat, and you'll get to actually see a surfer that's in rhythm with the ocean, and whoever wins the heat typically is the one that is in the most rhythm with the ocean. And sometimes really great surfers lose a heat because they just could not get into rhythm, and they just couldn't feel it. They couldn't be in the right spot. So rhythm is critical. And when you try to fight rhythm, you are going to lose. The ocean always wins. When you try to resist it, you just kind of get pushed back. So for example, I like to surf one spot. It's called Poena Point. You can also see it on Surfline if you're curious. And it is I guess it's kind of a point break, but it's really a kind of a reef break. And it is a really good spot for beginner surfers. But sometimes when the waves get really big, it's the only spot that I technically can surf because I am not into going double overhead at a steep, fast, pitchy wave. So I will go out to Poena Point. But sometimes what happens, and what has happened to me many times, I will look at the wave, and if you're standing on the beach, you can look at it, you're like, oh, okay, it's really, really big. But what you're not looking at is the current. And so the current can actually drag you either straight out to sea, or it'll just keep pushing you back. So you may be paddling as hard as you can, and I feel like I'm pretty good at paddling, but sometimes you'll be paddling and you're like in the wrong spot, and you just keep getting pushed back and pushed back. It doesn't matter how hard you paddle against the ocean, if you are not going with the current, then you are going to get pulled back, and you're not going to make it out to the spot where you want to paddle out to. So there's this little trick at Poena Point. If you ever surf there, little trick, there are some rockies on the side. So if you're paddling out on your right side, there's kind of like a little rocky section. And most people are kind of scared to paddle too close to the rocks because if the waves come and you time it wrong, you can get smashed on the rocks. I've almost gotten smashed multiple times. But If it's really strong current, what you do is you hug those rocks, like you paddle out right next to those rocks, and you will be able to get all the way out to the takeoff zone pretty quickly. And I have seen people do this. I'm sitting there, I'm paddling in the middle, and like not on the right spot. I'm getting caught in the current. And then I see these guys, I'm like, how are they getting back out there? They just rode like this massive wave all the way around, and they're already back out to the takeoff zone, and I have maybe made it 5 feet, and I just keep getting dragged back to the same spot. And it's because they understand rhythm. They understand the current. They know how to work with the ocean instead of trying to fight it, because you can try to muscle your way through, but the guy with the most muscles does not win in the ocean. I've seen this happen lots of times. Like we have some, on that note, side note, we have some military people here on the island. If you serve in the forces, I thank you so much. I appreciate your service. But we have some here that think, they're all that in a bag of chips, and they will come and paddle out to, especially Puana Point. It's definitely a favorite of theirs. They will come and paddle out, and they think like, oh, because I'm like big and strong and I work out, this won't be that hard. And it is so funny to watch them. You can tell when it's their, first few times in the ocean, because they just are like muscle paddling, like versus like a nice, you think of like a nice smooth, like I call it the S stroke is really what I like to use. But very, very smooth paddling versus like, so it's pretty funny to watch. So muscling your way through, you're not going to get very far. You may burn up a lot of energy, but you're not working with the ocean. And so I think one of the biggest things I have learned, I know we've talked a lot about ocean and surfing and all that good stuff, but how that applies to life, it is just, I was thinking about it. I've been actually thinking about this topic for a week or so now. And I was thinking about, what? It's really magical to live in rhythm with nature. And that is something that I find very grounding for me being here. I have never felt so in tune with nature as I do here on the island. Like everybody has their own spot on the planet. I don't think everyone should move to an island. I don't think it's a great environment for the majority of people. But for those of you who resonate with the island, you understand what I'm talking about. And if you resonate with your area, with your geographical area, a lot of people I know love the 4 seasons, and there's something very rhythmic about it. You kind of know what's coming in summer, you know what's coming in autumn, you know to prepare for winter, and you have different activities and a different way of being based on that rhythm. When you try to have like summer days in winter, you're going to be sorely disappointed because they're just not going to happen unless you go to a tropical paradise, right? So learning to live in rhythm. And when we do this, when we stop fighting it, when we stop trying to force things, there are so many health benefits, I think, mentally, psychologically, career-wise, thinking about our business. And the same concept does apply to business. Last week, I did talk about being true to my purpose. I shared a lot about the business and what I had been struggling with and where I want to go next. And this concept of rhythm is really what it's all about. I realize I have a ton of momentum going for me right now, and I was trying to shut down all that rhythm. I was trying to shut down all that momentum with my one-to-one clients that I actually love doing the work for. I actually love working with all these cool people and these cool teams. Like I couldn't imagine just having, being in a job and just having, I guess it would be one client. Like I love the diversity, and I really like the flow. I like kind of being in everybody else's teams and seeing how they work. It's a pleasure and an honor, and I really, really enjoy it. And I have momentum there. And so what I had to realize, like this past week, if you were a fly on the wall in my house this past week, I had a lot of conversations. I had a lot of moments. It's so funny being an entrepreneur or business owner. Everyone sees like the face of you, they see your live streams, they see your content, they're like, wow, you look so put together. And on the back end, I'm like, if you could only see like the ups and downs on the back end. Where I'm like, I don't want to do my business anymore. Maybe I should just get a job. This is so frustrating. It's kind of funny and comical. So just know if you're getting into business or maybe you're shifting or pivoting, like we all go through it. Okay. Maybe not everyone's going to tell you. They may put on this persona that they are so consistent, so steady Eddie. They never have these fluctuations. It's all very predictable. They have it all figured out. They don't. And we're all figuring it out. It doesn't matter if you've been in business 10 years, 12 years, 20 years, 30 years. We're all figuring things out, and we all have challenges, and we all have those like roller coaster moments where it's like, I should just give up. I just want to write books. That tends to be my default. Like when I get frustrated, it's pretty funny. It's kind of like a running joke in the house. When I get upset or frustrated, I'm like, I have told you for 10 years that all I want to do is write books. I just want to be an author. And my partner is incredibly patient. He just smiles at me and goes, oh, I know. But he's like, in the back of his mind, and later on, it's like, Mindy, you would get so bored. Like, you need like the external stimulation. You love helping the people you work with. And that is the truth. And so if you are going and feeling a little bit out of rhythm, and maybe you're struggling or you're fighting the current, it's like, take a moment to pause. And sometimes this happens. Like, if I get stuck in a current and I'm like going in circles, or I'm getting frustrated out in the water, what I will often do is I will just stop. I will look at my markers, because basically when you are in the ocean, you want to know where you are at all times. So make sure you're in a safe zone before you stop. You don't want to be close to the rocks, or be, thrown up on the beach or anything like that. So you always check and make sure you're in a safe zone by your markers. And then you just kind of pause. You say, okay, here's a set coming through, and I can, as long as I'm not taking them all on the head, because that's not very fun, what you need to do is you just kind of pause, and you look at the situation. You say, okay, should I paddle into the beach? Do I need a break? Do I need to like sit on the beach and regroup? Can I just sit here where I am? Maybe there's a bunch of current around me, or a bunch of people, and I just need to kind of take a moment to breathe and pause and wait till the set is done and then paddle back out. Or does it make sense for me to catch a wave and just ride it into the beach? Because sometimes that makes the most sense, so you can regroup and not waste a bunch of energy. So when you feel like you're just spinning and you're not in that rhythm, pause. Like, do some journaling, do some talking. Like, if you're an internal processor, then you may want to journal. That really helps me a lot. I'm kind of a blend of an internal processor and external processor, which means I like to journal things, and I also like to talk them out with a trusted friend. And usually it's Jason, my partner. Like, he's fantastic. My mom is also a really great external processor for me. So having like friends or family that you can turn to is really, really helpful when you feel like you're spinning or caught in a current and it's just not working for you. And then you also need to pay attention to when you need to stop. Like, sometimes you really shouldn't be out there surfing. If the conditions are preventing you from surfing, if you don't have the skills, if you don't have the paddle power, then you just say, okay, today is not my day. I'm going to go in. And that's okay. I'm not giving up. Not that I'm like giving up. Oh, you're a failure. It's like the conditions aren't right for your skill level. And just go in. It's fine. Move on. And when you live in that rhythm, when you know the conditions where you thrive, then you can look out and say, oh yeah, this is perfect. Or this is just above my skill level, but I'm going to give it a try. And if things go south, I have my game plan to get back to safety. This is the same concept that we use when approaching any type of risk in our businesses, in our family lives, in our lifestyle, anything like that. We make an assessment. We decide whether or not we're going to paddle out. If it gets crazy out there, we figure out the safest way to get back in. If we need help, we get help. And we do our very best, but don't feel like a failure if you just can't get in rhythm with the ocean. Sometimes it's just not your day. And this concept is something that I just have to keep telling myself over and over again, because I tend to be that one who likes to muscle through. I like to say, you know what? I know the current is against me, but I'm just going to sit here and paddle. I'm going to do this as a paddling workout. And I have no fun when I do that. I have done that multiple times just because I'm bullheaded. And I'm like, okay, I said I was going to surf for an hour. I'm going to paddle my my booty off in the ocean. And I come in just exhausted. I'm like, that wasn't worth my time. And so I'm becoming a smarter surfer. I am learning which conditions are actually good for me and which ones are not. Am I perfect? No, but I am learning how to get into that rhythm. So when things aren't working, stop resisting. Stop paddling against the current where you end up further back than where you started. Work with the ocean. Work with nature. Work with momentum. Work with what is getting you into flow. And sometimes you don't even realize that you are in flow when it's happening. And I think that's also tricky, because sometimes you don't even realize that things are going so well. And you want to come up and just change it all, because it's not going fast enough. That tends to be mine. Like, I was just talking like a few minutes ago about this. I was like, it's just not happening fast enough. He's like, Mindy, it's never going to happen fast enough. You are always on a trajectory where you want to go faster, sooner, bigger, better. We all want that. But realize when you are in a flow, when things are flowing, when you have, especially like in business, like I have noticed lately that opportunities are just flowing to me. I'm like, where are they coming from? Sometimes I have those moments where you're like, I don't know where business is going to come from. And when you build a solid business, when you are doing what you're supposed to be doing at this moment in time, you are going to experience that flow. Yes, I had to put in a lot of effort over the past 10 plus years to get to this point. It wasn't always flowing. So yes, there are times where you do need to push yourself a little bit harder. But when you realize like every single thing you try, like if you get into a place where everything you try is failing, like if you're in a business and you start a business, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. You're all excited at the beginning. So you go down this path and every single thing that you try, like if you're trying things for months on end and things just aren't working, you kind of rethink things and not just keep plowing forward. And I see too many, especially entrepreneurs in my space, there's some memberships in places where I'm a member of, and I like watch people just kind of like, I feel like they're just butting their heads against the wall for like months on end. I'm like, it's not getting any traction. Like, try again. You need a different offer. You need a different audience. You need to sell something different. Your market is not buying from you. Like something is off and you have to figure out what that is if you want to continue in business. But when you are noticing flow in your business, that is not the time necessarily to change things up. A lot of times you got to lean into that flow and go with it because that is going to take you where you actually are supposed to be. And so the rhythm, the flow, there was this, I was at Point, again, lots of Point stories today. I was at Point and I was actually struggling during one of my sessions where I said I was going to muscle my way through the session. I had like my mental capacity. I'm like, okay, this is like a mental workout. I'm going to do this because it's hard. And I actually was trying to paddle. I was next to this little kid. He probably was, I would say 7, maybe 8. And he was on a little shortboard. And his dad was right there with him. And he said, today is tricky. He said, look at the ocean, look at the conditions. He said, what you're looking for is you're looking for that rip, that current that's going to pull you out. He said, don't fight the ocean. Don't ever fight the ocean. He says, you work with it. And if you can't work with it, you paddle in. And it was just something that just stuck with me. I thought, that was such good advice. Work with the ocean. If you can't work with it, paddle in. Try again another day. Try a different approach. Try paddling out to a different spot. Try a different board. Figure out what is going awry and reassess. Go back to your starting point if you have to. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means that you weren't in rhythm that day. And that is totally fine. So living in rhythm with nature to become a better surfer is like going with the flow in your business, your life, and your career. When you are not fighting that current, those blustery wind conditions, you are going to be able to catch the best waves of your life and continue riding that momentum. And that's what we're searching for. That's what so many of us are looking for is like, how do I get into that rhythm with my life? How do I get into that rhythm with my family? How do I feel fulfilled at work? How do I know that I'm living my purpose? And it is looking for that rhythm. And when it happens, treasure it. Pay attention when you are flowing, when you have those moments, you're like, wow, the time just flew, or wow, I actually really enjoyed that thing I didn't think I was going to like, or wow, that client just hired me for $10K for a small gig. Fantastic. So these little signs are signs of rhythm happening in your life. So pay attention. So how are you living in rhythm with your nature? Like we talked a lot about our places and whether you're in a 4 seasons place, maybe you're in Alaska where you have like completely different, I can't even imagine what it would be like to live there. Or I have some clients in Sweden, so they tell me about what it's like there, maybe Australia, wherever you live. How are you living in rhythm with nature? Because I feel like when you can dial that in and when you can actually pay attention to what's happening outside, not just inside your house, but outside, like working in rhythm with nature, it's really interesting how that actually comes to, affect your internal world and your internal state. And then is there some way you can apply the concept of rhythm and going with the flow to other aspects of your life and work? Think about it for a moment. Maybe use it as a journal prompt, like, okay, where is rhythm happening for me right now? Where else can I go with the flow? Is there anything that's really working well? And pay attention to that because a lot of times we forget. When things are working well, we don't pay attention. We just look at all the other things. That's what happens to me a lot. I catch myself doing it. I'm like, I'm so grateful I do. I'm grateful I do a gratitude journal because it brings me back to like what was good. Sometimes when my mind starts doing the whole monkey mind thing and, it's so bad. No, it's not really that bad. You're just like hyper focusing on something negative. And then when have you caught yourself resisting the rhythm? Like when do you find yourself like paddling and muscling it out when you really should be just either taking a breather, trying a different spot, using a different technique, or paddling in? So I would love to hear your take on this topic, and feel free to DM me on Instagram to share your take on rhythm and flow and why surfers are not flaky. We are not flaky. We just plan really, really well around what's happening in nature because we have to, because there's no other option. So I'm also on TikTok, but actually my daughter Michaela, she actually manages my @MangoEffect podcast account on TikTok. So if you send a message there, you will probably get her, and she will be all excited to respond to you. So feel free. Instagram @MangoEffect podcast or TikTok @MangoEffect podcast. Let's encourage and inspire each other this week. So if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the Mango Effect podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss another episode. And I would be absolutely thrilled if you could write a 5-star review for the show, only if you love it, of course. We are a new show, so any reviews and subscribes we get will definitely help us as we grow. All right, that's it for this episode. I will talk to you in the next one. Bye for now.